Welcome to this edition of the Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Jeremy, and I'm here with Matt VanAcker, who's the co-chair of the Save the Flags project for the state of Michigan. And we're going to talk a little bit about this flag that we have here in front of us and the story that goes along with it. So Matt,
Great.
Can you tell me a little bit about what we're seeing
I'd be
here?
happy to, yeah. So this is a regimental. Typically, the Michigan regiments would receive a stand of colors, the national that everyone's very familiar with, and then the regimentals, which were typically dark blue. Sometimes would have the state coat of arms on one side, or as you see here, the federal eagle with its outstretched wings. This particular regimental was carried by the 3rd Michigan Infantry Regiment, which formed very early in the war. The spring of '61, formed in Grand Rapids. Charles Foster came from a long historic family. His grandfather had fought in the War of 1812. His father, Theodore, moved to Michigan at the age of 16, settled down in near Ann Arbor in Scio Township. Charles's father, Theodore, became a zealous advocate for abolition. He was the editor of the Signal of Liberty, which was the state's leading abolitionist newspaper, which was published in Ann Arbor. Theodore was also a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And actually, largely due to his activity on the Underground Railroad, he and his family were sort of kicked out of the community because it was against the law to harbor fugitive slaves by the Fugitive Slave Act.
So all of that must have led up to Charles Foster feeling a duty to state and country in his early enlistment?
It really did. I mean, Foster knew that his father was involved in the Underground Railroad. His brother Seymour wrote that they would play games of tag in the house down near Ann Arbor. And they said one day they were playing a spirited game of tag, and one of them tipped over a huge barrel in the basement, and underneath the barrel was a very frightened black man. And Theodore was hiding him till the next evening so he could get him to the next stop on the Underground Railroad. Charles grew up in this environment. He recognized the importance of ending slavery and what his father termed as the scourge of slavery in this country. He came by it naturally. Eventually, when the Civil War started, there was a huge war rally here in Lansing at the old wooden Capitol. And Charles turned out to the war rally, as did, they said, most of the city of Lansing. Speech after fiery speech was given that day, and the orators were trying to fire up the crowd to get them excited about fighting for the Union. At the end of the last speech, a man by the name of Tenney, Judge Tenney, said that a role had been created, and any man that was willing to offer his services in defense of the country should come forward and sign his name. Charles's brother Seymour wrote about this years later. He had perched himself in a windowsill and was listening to all the speeches and the commotion. And according to Seymour, the room got deadly quiet. And then they said all of a sudden there was the noise of a lone man making his way up to the front of the rostrum. Seymour couldn't see who it was, but he could hear him, and everyone was parting the way to make room for him. Charles Foster came up, signed his name to the book. Seymour's only brother, and his oldest brother, had just become the first man from the capital city to enlist in the Union Army. Foster goes out with a group of 30 men from Lansing. They fight in all the early battles of the war, the Peninsula Campaign. Going up to the Battle of Williamsburg, the major rides forward in front of the regiment, and he says, "Our color bearer has given out. I need a man to volunteer to carry the colors." Charles Foster steps forward, volunteers to carry the colors, survives the battle, writes a letter home to Lansing to his mother and father, and he says, "I volunteered to carry the colors in the last fight."
And he was well aware of the dangerous position that put him.
He knew of the danger. He said in the letter, he said, "You may wonder why I would volunteer for such a dangerous duty." And he said, "I was afraid that if I didn't volunteer, that the major would have to select a man, and that the duty would fall to someone who had either dependent children or dependent parents at home. Me being single and free, I figured I wouldn't be missed if I was killed." Wrote this letter to his mother. Seymour wrote years later that it was a good thing Charles never knew the anguish that one line in the letter had caused their mother. About 2 weeks after the Battle of Williamsburg, the same thing happened. The color bearer was not able to carry the colors. The major asked for a volunteer. Foster volunteered again to carry the flag. Charge after charge, the Battle of Fair Oaks. Charles is shot through the neck, carrying the battle flag, carrying this battle flag. His last words and his last actions on this earth were in defense of this flag. He takes the staff and he shoves it into the ground in an attempt to keep it aloft so the men of his regiment won't lose their alignment. He looks to the man next to him and he said, "Don't let the colors go down." Last words. He's buried in the battlefield at Seven Pines right now. His family was never able to bring his body home. His father, Theodore, said that that was the thing that kept he and his wife up at night, was the thought of their son laying in his blood-soaked clothes on the battlefield where he died. I have a horrible feeling of the guilt that Theodore must have felt. He raised Charles the way he did. Charles was the man he was because of the way he was raised, and it was, I'm sure, largely due to his abolitionist feelings that Charles became the first man from the capital city to enlist and the first man from the capital city of Michigan to die in the Union Army. I walk by Charles's home almost every evening on my way to my car where I park in the city. I look at the house, I look at the windows, and I try to imagine which bedroom was Charles's, and I think of him, and to me that's my touchstone to this project. That's what keeps this real and makes me, I hope, be passionate about the project. It's important that we remember these men.
Thank you, Matt. And that was a moving story from start to finish with some amazing history. And stand in the presence of the flag that means so much and meant so much to Charles and the bravery that he showed. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Civil War Digital Digest and our time here with Matt. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead and like the video, perhaps share it out, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get email updates when we have new content. Thank you.